Hello friends, my name is Michelle Fondin and I'm the author of Help, I Think My Loved One is an Alcoholic, a survival guide for lovers, family, and friends. And welcome to our video forum on alcoholism and addiction. Today we're going to talk about listening to your alcoholic's vocabulary to know whether they're in recovery or not. This is a real question that I get often, and it's a question I had often when my alcoholic was in early recovery, going into relapses, going back into early recovery, going back to relapses. And it was really hard for me because of the deception, lies, denial. It was hard for me to know if he was actually attending meetings, really working on the program, working through the program, or if he was back to drinking. And that can be extremely frustrating if you're a family member, a spouse, if it's your mother, father, sister, brother, girlfriend, boyfriend, adult child, and you've really had the break in trust in the relationship, and it's really hard to know, like, are they telling the truth? Are they really in recovery? Or is this just one of their ploys to get me to help them more? And it's really difficult in these early phases of sobriety or in these early attempts at sobriety because you really don't know if they're telling the truth, and it can be extremely frustrating, especially if you need to deal with the person on a day-to-day basis. So I have some clues to give you to know whether or not your alcoholic is indeed in recovery or not. And here are the clues. I discovered this myself by listening to my alcoholic. A lot of times what we want to do is we want to jump to conclusions, or we want so desperately to believe that this time they'll stay sober and they'll be in recovery and attend meetings and attend rehab and outpatient treatment programs. We want to believe it so much that when it comes out of their mouth, we believe that. Whereas many of the other things we tended not to believe, or we were skeptical about believing because we were used to the deception and lies and denial. However, when it reaches the point of, oh my gosh, they're actually going to AA meetings, we get this sense of elation, we get this sense of false hope in the sense that, like, we get too hopeful and we think like, oh, okay, once they attend meetings, all is well. Well, first of all, it's really important that you know that early sobriety is really difficult for most addicts. Early sobriety, getting clean, is so challenging for them on a physical, mental, emotional, spiritual level. It's so challenging that when they start attending a program or attending meetings, that it's not a smooth ride for them. It's often times of relapse and going back and doubts and going back to binge drinking or using. And it's not typically a very smooth ride. So just know that your best expectations or your best hopes for them might be shattered a little bit by those early relapses. Now, not everyone relapses. I know plenty of alcoholics and addicts who have said that they stopped. They were in a program, in a 30, 60, 90-day program, and they stopped completely and they've never gone back. But that's a little more rare. Maybe, think of like maybe 30 to 40% never go back and relapse, while 60 to 70% actually do relapse. So just know that initially. But if you're really not sure whether or not they're telling the truth, here are some indications. Really be the detective and listen to their vocabulary, their internal vocabulary, because they'll mutter things to themselves, and their external vocabulary, what they're saying to you in joking, in jest, what they're saying to you seriously, what they're saying to you in passing, what they're saying to you in conversation. Because someone who is committed to recovery, their vocabulary changes drastically. Let me give you some examples. So I'm sure if you were to observe your drinking alcoholic, you will hear vocabulary words that are very much tied into alcohol, drugs, bars, alcohol in grocery stores, alcohol in restaurants, alcohol in other places. It'll be alcohol, alcohol, alcohol. They're completely obsessed with alcohol every step of the way. And their vocabulary, no matter what they happen to be talking about, somehow will always come back to alcohol. It just will. It's incredible. I observed this in my alcoholic loved one when I was just in observation mode. I was just kind of listening to the vocabulary he was using. I was listening to the things that he says. And I was like, whoa, like every single time he somehow wraps it back around to the drinking, drugging, use. It's totally insane how they do this, but they totally do. And oftentimes we tend to tune it out, or we don't really listen, or we jump to conclusions, or we're angry at them or frustrated, and we don't really listen to their vocabulary. So for example, they might say, well, you know, I was at the grocery store the other day and, you know, they were giving away free wine samples. Like, they'll say things like that and you're thinking like, well, they're attending meetings or sober, so why would they say something like that? Well, they say something like that because they're still drinking. So they're like, that obsession is still there. They will say things like, oh, I noticed that my favorite bar is now closing at midnight rather than 2 a.m. And you're like, well, how do you know that? You haven't been to the bar. Well, no, but a friend told me. They'll say things like that. Or they'll say, you know, I was talking to so-and-so the other day and they told me that, you know, the Costco at this location sells this type of liquor, but the Costco at this location doesn't sell this type of liquor. And, you know, so you might have been talking about a shopping trip to Costco and all of a sudden they're bringing up alcohol again. You're like, what? So their vocabulary is very much centered around drinking, alcohol, drugs, DUIs, jail, people who party, people, you know, it's so involved in that lifestyle that they can't use other vocabulary words because it's so infused in that. No matter what they are doing, it's infused. Just notice it. Just take this week and notice how you're drinking alcoholic, or even maybe early sober alcoholic. Really, that's all they talk about. It's about alcohol. You could be talking about the president, or you could be talking about poverty in a third world country, and they will somehow wrap the conversation back around to alcohol. It's very strange how they do that, but they do. The second thing is, how do I know if they in fact are getting sober? Well, you'll notice that these things will start to change, that their vocabulary starts to change. It might slowly change in the beginning, but if they've been telling you they've been attending meetings for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, rest assured that that vocabulary, if they're committed to the program, if they're really committed to this happening, and they're very serious about getting sober and clean, their vocabulary does start to change. You start to hear things like, oh my gosh, my sponsor said this to me this morning, or I noticed this story in a meeting that really matched my story. It was like really interesting how those stories coincide. Or you might hear my higher power, or HP, they'll refer to that. They'll refer to little slogans that you hear in AA and NA. You'll hear like one day at a time, or the next 24 hours, or they might talk about the chips that they earned at meetings. They might talk about, oh my God, you know, now being sober, I remember this incident that happened to me when I was 25 and I had totally forgotten about it. But now that my memory's getting clearer, I'm starting to remember these memories. And so you hear vocabulary that is totally changed. It's changed toward personal development, toward spirituality, toward wonder and awe. An alcoholic described to me that being sober for the first time for an extended period of time is almost like waking up from a dream, or like when the movie turns color. Like if you were watching a black and white movie and all of a sudden the color turns on in that movie, like The Wizard of Oz. And this specific alcoholic I spoke to for my book actually was saying that for him, it was almost like that movie, the old movie of The Wizard of Oz, where it was in black and white in the beginning of the movie. And then when Dorothy went to Oz, that it turned color. And he said, that's what life was like for me being sober. It was like, whoa, like there are colors everywhere. I'd never noticed this before. So when they're really sincerely in sobriety, their vocabulary is going to turn around those moments of wonder and awe and like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this happened, or I can't believe that I did this. Do you believe that I did this for like 20 years, 30 years? So they're going to start to tell you more things, but those things are not going to revolve around so much the drinking, the alcohol, or discovering new bars, or discovering new restaurants, or discovering the free wine in the aisle at the grocery store. But it's going to more revolve around this newfound freedom in discovering the world and in hearing other people's stories and understanding that other people are like them and that they're not alone in this. So the vocabulary is going to vastly, vastly change. Now, in early sobriety also, there are moments of rage, there's moments of anger, there's moments of frustration. But if they are regularly attending meetings or a program, or they've just come out of rehab, those moments are very momentary. And they're usually supported by an apology. They're usually supported by a, oh shoot, like I really need to go to a meeting, or maybe I should call my sponsor, or I'm really sorry, like I blew up at you and I really didn't mean it. You know, so it's usually held with accountability if they do go into those moments of rage, anger, which is normal because their body has been so used to consuming alcohol or drugs, or both, that their body has a hard time recalibrating once they are sober and clean, and it does take some time. The time is anywhere between 1 to 3 years for the body to heal. And for the brain to heal, yeah, it's closer to that 3-year mark. The brain is severely affected by the alcohol and drugs, so just know that. So again, listen to the vocabulary, hear the words that they are speaking. Try not to judge it, but just analyze it. Analyze the words. And you don't want to analyze the words over a singular conversation because, for example, let's take the example of the free wine at the grocery store. If your alcoholic says, hey, you know what I noticed? I noticed there was free wine at the grocery store. They might be just saying that to you, saying that like, oh, that's something I noticed. But if they follow up that with like, gosh, I'm so glad I'm not there anymore. You know what I mean? They might follow it up with something like that. Or their next conversation might be all about an AA meeting and something that they discovered about themselves within that meeting. And so even though, yeah, Alcoholics Anonymous is supposed to be anonymous, usually alcoholics are really excited about sharing some of the things that they learned, not necessarily revealing other people's identities, but they're usually really excited to share like, oh my gosh, like I really didn't know this, or the Serenity Prayer really helped me today, or my sponsor was like super cool, like he kept me accountable, like he called me at 7 a.m. to make sure I was getting to a meeting. So they'll usually tell stories like that along the way. And especially if you have a close relationship with them. If you don't have such a close relationship with them, it might be difficult to hear them say certain things, but still, if you're talking with them, listen more to the conversation that they're saying than speaking, and then you will really get a clearer picture of where they are in the recovery. So thank you so much for joining me. Please subscribe to my channel below. Leave a comment if it's really constructive, or if you have something to share with others that can be really, really helpful along the lines of this topic. Please share this video with friends, family, and your dog. Support me on Patreon. I don't get paid for these videos. www.patreon.com/Michelle S. Fondin. You can pledge $1 a month, $3 a month, $10 a month, whatever it is you feel that you get out of these videos. Thanks so much again, and I will see you in the next video.